Welcome to the Evo India podcast. In this episode, we are going to be talking about what you guys keep asking us: how to be an automotive journalist. And of course, we are also going to make it a little wider in scope and talk about the life and times of an automotive journalist in India. I'm Sirish Chandran, editor of Evo India, and with me is Aatish Mishra, assistant editor at Evo. Aatish, how did you start off in automotive journalism?
Well, I started out like most people started out with an internship. When I was back in college, I joined journalism school with the intention to get into automotive journalism. It's what I always wanted to do. And through college, I managed to bag an internship at Autocar India. Two internships, actually. I even missed one of my school industrial visits for an internship at Autocar India. So I did two internships at Autocar. Then I did one internship with you.
At
And then
Evo?
at Evo. And then I finally got a correspondent role at Evo India magazine.
So, most of us who are right now automotive journalists in India, I think at least half, if not more, all started off as interns. That's how I started off. So, in 2000, I was doing my final year of engineering, and sometime in early 2000, I'd written to Overdrive. There was an ad there that said, "Enthusiast ahoy, if you're interested in cars, blah, 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 blah." So, I wrote to them. I penned my very first piece. I had never written anything in my life. I wrote something on the Zen that I was using back then, sent that off to Overdrive, and 2 months later, Adil, he called home, landlines in those days, no mobile phones. He called home, said that I want to speak to Sirish. My mom called me. I was interning at Thermax also at the same time. And she said that this guy called Adil wants to speak to you. And I was like, my God, God has called me. So I went and met Adil Jal Darukhanawala. He was the founding editor of Overdrive and a journalist of long-standing repute. Ever since I was in short pants, I used to read him earlier in Car and Bike and then in Overdrive. So I went and met Adil. We had a conversation for I think 3-4 hours, and he said, "Would you like to join?" I said, "Hell yeah, I want to join." I had zero clue what it took to be a motoring journalist. And in 2000, remember, those were early days. So neither did my parents know what this whole lark was all about. And my dad freaked out because instead of going to the States and doing my master's in engineering, I took a break and I was sitting here and driving cars and riding bikes. And that did not look like a job. Honestly, even today, it doesn't look like a job. I keep telling everybody that I get paid to basically be a do a hobby, but that's what it is, and the way things have grown. So in this podcast, let's talk about what it takes to be a motoring journalist. Do you need qualifications? Do you need education qualifications? Do you need work experience? What sort of background do you need? And also, what are the opportunities? So you always look at the front facing guys, whether it's writers or presenters now on video, but there are far more roles that go into putting together either a magazine or a good YouTube channel. So we will talk about all of that. Internships now. Uh, there are a lot of things that go into an internship and a lot of roles that an intern fulfills. Adish, what did you start off in when you were interning?
So back in Autocar days, I started with a spec sheet. I was literally pulling out specs of every single car and every single bike on the market and putting it into Excel for the What Car website that they wanted to make back then. So it was just that. I was sitting online 8 hours a day pulling out specs of every single car, every single variant, and then features of every single variant. It was mind numbing, absolutely mind numbing. By the end of it, I knew everything like the back of my hand, which was good in a way because when I finally started writing about things, I actually knew I was very comfortable with writing about features, specs. I was also very comfortable with the websites, which is a huge time saver. If you're sitting and struggling with how to navigate a manufacturer's website, it's a time sucker. If you know how to navigate it, it's really easy. So started on the spec sheet, uh, and I was actually interning with Autocar Professional, not Autocar India, for the first internship. So I actually did a few B2B web stories for Autocar Professional, and then when I came over to Evo India, that's when I started doing a little more stuff. I again started with the website, but then I think you guys also realized that I could write a little bit, so you all started giving me a little bit of magazine work. I remember my first web story for the magazines that went into the, I think it was the July 2015 issue, you know. So yeah, that's how I started web stories, and then you work your way up. You work your way up from news to maybe small advertorials to bigger advertorials to drives to feature stories, and it's a ladder that you have to climb. But if you're good at what you do and you enjoy what you do, you'll get there.
So there is a 15-year gap between Atish and me, our internship times, but the basics
Yeah.
are more or less the same,
Did you also start on the spec sheet?
because even I did start on the spec sheets. And when I used to do spec sheets, I used to muck it up every single time. So Yogendra, who's the editor of Auto today, he was the assistant editor at Overdrive. He would always check my specification sheets and he would always point out errors. And until I stopped doing specification sheets, which must have been 2 3 years later, every single time I would, some area or the other, I would muck up. I don't know why. It was just, I just don't know why that would happen. But that, like you said, gave me a solid grounding because I knew the power, torque, weight, length, you name it, everything I knew about every car because I was doing those spec sheets. Today at Evo, we've taken out the
Yep.
back of the book, which is the car and bike prices pages, because that's all there on the website. So instead of spending 16 pages in the magazine looking at prices and
Absolutely.
also making mistakes, because no matter how diligently you do it, you'll still make mistakes over there. We thought we'll might as well put 16 more pages of great enthusiastic content. So that's not there in Evo. So that, at least when
But
interns come in at Evo, they don't do that.
I want to pause you there. Uh, you said you were doing specs. How were you doing specs? Because everything I did, I was just Googling off the internet, downloading brochures, and filling them into this Excel sheet. Back then, there was probably no web brochures and online brochures. What were your spec sheet hunting like?
So we had to make a data sheet,
Hmm.
like a pre-filled or blank sheet,
Yeah.
which then we would send out to manufacturers. We had one computer in office that was connected to the internet, one computer. On that, there would be one guy who would be downloading pictures from DPPI, which were all the Formula One and MotoGP pictures.
Yeah.
And each picture must have been maybe 1 MB at the max. Each picture would take 25 minutes on a good day to download. So when he would finish with that, we would then go across and send out an email to the manufacturer saying, this is the attached template, please fill in the spec sheets. And then they would take a printout of it, they would write it by hand, then they would scan it, then they would send it back to us. A lot of the spec sheets used to come by fax. I'm sure you haven't even seen a fax
I've seen a
machine.
fact. I'm not that young.
But we used to get faxes. We used to get spec sheets in
Yeah.
faxes. We would get brochures.
Yeah.
Those days, brochures were extremely important. That was our research tool because there was no Googling and all of that. There used to be something called Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves, and those were nascent years of the internet. When I sent off my very first piece to Overdrive, it was emailed, but it was emailed through a student VSNL connection, which was at a lower bandwidth than the regular VSNL connections because you couldn't afford a proper VSNL connection. And we had those modems and go. It was insanely slow. So nobody would even waste time bothering with the internet. We would actually go out and drive. So a test in those days would be, we would go to Ahmednagar to the VRD, we would spend an entire day testing, then we would come back, we would chew the fat, basically chew over what all we understood, then go out and drive again, then again come in. So there was a lot of discussion, a lot of time pass. Everything was slow cooked.
Yeah.
Aram se we used to do everything.
And I think that's a good way to contrast it with what things are like today in the context of an internship. You know, back then things were obviously very different to you, but people joining into the ranks today, what is the internship experience going to be like today for them?
So what I've seen is that an internship basically throws you into the deep end. That is what happened with me,
Mhm.
23 years ago now, and that's what I do with interns today. And those who can swim, those who enjoy it, those who get enthused by that whole environment of being around cars and bikes non-stop 24/7, they are the ones who actually make it, because in this line enthusiasm is, I think, 80%.
I'll pause you there. This actually, for verbatim, brings me back to one of the things that happened to me during my internship. I remember it was the off-road expo in Goa. We were doing a bunch of stories around it, and Osip, who was then assistant editor, told me, Aatish, this JCB story is yours. And that was the first big story that was assigned to me. I was supposed to review a JCB. I never reviewed a car before. I was supposed to review a JCB. But Osip told me it's your story. I said, okay, I'll drive it. I'll try and write it. But can Dipayan also get behind the levers, wheels, the lever of the JCBs? So just in case I bugger up the story, there's another hand who has experienced it to write a proper story. He said, no, nobody else is driving it. Only you're going to drive it and only you're going to do the story. And that was, I literally felt like I was being thrown into the deep end there. You know, there was pressure. I had to deliver. There was no way out of it. There was no nobody else to back me up in case I did a bad job, and I had to swim, like you said.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think in any industry. I worked for a short time on the other side of the fence in marketing and communications. Nothing is easy in this life. In this world, everything is hard. But if you deal with it with the right attitude and you go in with 110%, it will give you back. You get your rewards. So when we started off, it took me 5 years to drive my very first Ferrari.
5 is not bad,
I think it was a long wait, but that Ferrari drive was special because I went to Maranello, picked up a 599 GTB, drove it through the hills of Modena. So it was epic. The thing is that if you wait, that wait results in greater rewards. My first Mercedes I drove was the E Class. That time the V6 E Class had just come out, and I drove it for all of I think 100 meters or 200 meters. But I was overjoyed. I got to drive a Mercedes. That was the first automatic transmission car I drove, and it was incredible. I still remember that car. It was a blue color car, if I'm not mistaken, the W204, whatever. But I loved that. It all comes slowly.
Yeah.
Now things come very quickly. So I think you within your first year you would have driven a Mercedes and a BMW and an Audi probably.
The first Mercedes is quite a story. You had sent me and Rohit, who's sitting behind the camera right now, and you sent us to Bangalore to cover the AMG Emotion Tour. And you told us that, while you're covering the tour, you do a story on all of the things that happened there. You do a story on the instructors that came. You do a story on what it's like to be an AMG owner, and also do a story of what it's like to drive each of these cars briefly. I said, why will I say no to that? And the first Mercedes I actually properly drove was a GTS.
Oh man.
I didn't even know how to put it into drive. I'm sitting there. I didn't know how to put it into drive, what to do. They put it into drive and they said, go. I was like, are you serious? This is how it works. Okay. And we were on Nice Road. I took it for, I think, a spin down Nice Road. Didn't dare cross 120. I was too scared. Seen too many videos on YouTube of supercars spinning out by people who didn't know how to control them. And that weekend, I drove an A45S. The CLA 45, sorry, there was no A45S. The GLA 45S, I drove a G63. I drove an E6, SL6, was it the S63 Coupe?
S63.
Yeah, that green one.
Yep.
There was some 9 AMGs I drove that weekend. And that was my first Mercedes experience.
So these days things come far quicker than it did in my day.
But I still haven't driven a Ferrari in Italy, Sirish? So the next invite.
I must tell you,
Yeah.
I hadn't gone on a Ferrari invite. I had gone on something else. Then I took a train from, I think, Milan to Maranello.
Oh, really?
From Maranello, I didn't know how to get to the Ferrari factory. There were no Google Maps those days. I think I took a cab, went to Maranello, picked up the car. I drove the whole day,
Yeah.
shot for myself. I drove, did everything myself, then dropped it off. And they said, okay, thank you. And I'm like, shit, now how do I get back to Milan? There were no cabs, there was nothing. So I walked, I think, 45 minutes or an hour to the train station. I think I finally made the last train to Milan. So it was not easy,
I'm sure
but
it wasn't.
it was worthwhile.
Yeah.
But these are things that you remember, right? Because you
course.
went through all the effort. Now, the thing I want to point out now is that things come easily
For sure.
today. But you should appreciate all of this because these things don't come to everybody. Who within 1 year of his first job gets to drive a bunch of AMGs? I don't know why, but this does not strike a bell. I'm like, damn man,
Yeah. I
you
shouldn't
got
have
it
told you
really
that,
good.
man.
Yeah. Now next time you complain about anything, I'll remember this. Who gets to do all these things,
It's
man?
unreal.
So this job is unreal, honestly, because you get to drive a whole variety of cars, ride a whole variety of bikes. You get to live your dream. This is a dream. I'm just back from 2 days driving a bunch of Audis on a frozen lake. Now, who gets to do these things? If you had to spend your own money, something like that would cost you maybe 5 lakhs plus your air ticket plus your hotel and all of that. It's these are this is a dream come true.
Yeah.
But you have to work really hard for it because what we are doing, we are communicators. We drive a car, ride a bike, and we put that into words or increasingly yabber away at the screen for YouTube, for videos. And our whole point is to put the reader or the viewer in the driver's seat or in the saddle of the motorcycle so that they experience what we are going through. Now, for that, you need a lot of experience because today Now, suppose I gave you, you're coming fresh out of college, I gave you an Alto to review. Everybody says Alto, big deal. But you can only review an Alto if you know what the Tiago is like, what the Quid is like, what its immediate rivals are like. Otherwise, an Alto would either be the worst car in the world or the best car in the world, depending on the perspective that you have. So, perspective in that segment is hugely important. And
Absolutely.
that's why I keep saying is that this job, it takes time. It
Yeah.
takes time for you to experience everything that is there in the market. And it's not like,
Mm.
no, you've come in as an intern and then all the manufacturers are standing in line waiting for you to drive their small cars
Mm.
or big cars or whatever. You know, it when only when the cars come for a review will you
Yeah.
get to drive it, and only then you build up your repository of information. And everybody has to have their own repository of information up in their head, so that when you review the next car, you know how it compares vis-a-vis something else. And that is important. That's why I keep telling a lot of the guys who come and work with us at Evo is that be patient. It takes time. Things will come, but it needs its own sweet time. Things are accelerated in this day and age because everything is very quick, and unlike in the past where you could slow cook everything,
Mm.
here it has to go out immediately. As soon as you see a car, you're already posting on social media, you're already forming the road test in your head, you're already forming the lines for your video, you are driving the car. Sometimes we have like 2 hours with the car, which is ridiculous. And in that 2 hours we have to shoot, film, review, talk to the camera, give our verdict, give our opinions. There are times when after the whole thing is over, when I sit down to write the story in the magazine, that's when I realize, and that's when I'm thinking about and remembering things that I experienced on that drive, and I say, oh yeah, so that was also there, and oh yes, that was also there. And that's why what we write in the magazine is everything. We sit down calmly, put all those thoughts down on paper, and that's the reason why it is more detailed, it has got more information, and it is more authoritative
It's
than
probably the
what
most
we would say
complete,
on video
yeah, the most complete version
version
of
of a
our
test.
reviews.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is a good place to bring in the skills that one requires. Back when even I started, we didn't have video. I mean,
Mm.
this was what, 8 years ago. We didn't have video. We would just about do a video if we needed to, if we had a lot of time and we were feeling really, okay, really cool cars come, let's try and do a video. Now you have to do a video for everything. And that has just broadened the number of skills that we as journalists need, right? Earlier, we needed to just be able to write.
Mm.
Now you need to be able to write. You need to be able to present.
Mm.
Social media is a new game. You need to be able to have some sort of eye for photography, for social media, some sort of eye for video making, for reels. You need to have obviously the ability to drive and
Mm.
understand a car. Anybody can drive a car. You need to be able to understand, analyze, and sort of judge the car accurately. And obviously that perspective that you spoke about, place that car within its larger segment. That's I mean, reviewing a car seems simple, but it's a lot of skill and a
And
lot
then
of
there are a lot of
practice.
buckets. There are a lot of buckets that go into it. So let's start with education. Now, that's something that a lot of you guys keep asking us. Now, what should we study
Yeah.
before we become or get into or even apply for an
What
internship?
did you study?
So I did my mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
You did your
I did
mass comm.
journalism.
You
Yeah.
did journalism. If you ask me, there is no right or wrong line to study. I keep telling people that do your graduation, finish your graduation, and then get into it, because it's always good to have something on paper. Maybe I'm old school, maybe you young guys don't need it anymore. But I just think that it's good to just finish with your education, then jump into it, because if you're doing your education and this, it becomes a lot. I know because I did it in my final year of engineering. I was interning at Thermax and I was interning at Overdrive. So I was doing three things. Luckily for me, my goal was to get a distinction in my final semester. I got that, and that was out of the way. Otherwise, my mom would have like hammered the shit out of me. But at least I finished with that. And then when I was working at Overdrive, I also did my post graduation in financial management, and that's because uh, again, my parents were thinking that I've gone completely lost my marbles in doing this and not following up on my engineering. So I thought I'll just do something and just have it in the bag for later on. But anyway, that's besides the point. I would suggest that if you do your journalism, at least you get some basics in how to write, how to use the different things that we use, the different gear, how to present, because that's also now taught at journalism schools. It's not hard and fast that you have to do journalism. Engineering helped me a lot because at least I always had a mechanical bent. I always used to work on my cars, work on my bike until I smashed my bike, but I used to always work on it myself. When I was growing up, my dad had a workshop back in Kerala, so I would spent a lot of time at the workshop. So doing an engineering, anything in engineering, gives you a solid foundation for the stuff that you're going to review.
Yeah.
And today, maybe somebody who's doing electronics engineering would be a better
But
fit because there's so much of electronics in cars
But
today.
again, it's not necessary. You know,
It's
you
not
can
necessary.
learn so much outside. YouTube has so much information today. I learned like that. Like,
Mm.
I have zero mechanical background.
Mm.
I had never picked up a spanner before I
Mm.
joined here, and I still don't really work on much. But I know how an engine works. I know what suspension does. I know how a transmission works. And you need to know those things if you're trying to do this job. But my point is, you can learn all of this on the side as well. You know?
True. So you don't have to have an education in that per se. So what should you learn? I don't think that's really that important.
Yeah.
Do what you enjoy. If you have a long-term vision for yourself, a career trajectory that you have in your mind, do that. Study that. And then if you get into a publishing setup, great. Now, the other thing is that what are the different roles in a publishing setup? In the past, it was just magazine. When I joined, there was Autocar, there was Overdrive, there was Business Standard Motoring, there was Auto India. So there were 4, maybe 5 magazines. Overdrive and Autocar were the 2 big magazines. Overdrive was the first one that really changed things around for automotive journalism, from a magazine where there would be maybe 15 pages of color to a full color magazine with tons of international content, nice big pictures. Overdrive absolutely was path breaking. Nothing else has made that kind of impact that Overdrive did in 1998 when it was launched. I remember going to a sort of auto show in Bombay, picked up my first Overdrive there. The next issue of Overdrive, my girlfriend, then wife, now wife, she got me a subscription, and that subscription actually expired the month I joined Overdrive. So I love the magazine, you know. But now it's not just magazine. In those days, you needed to be able to write. Obviously, testing. Now in India, there aren't any pure testing roles. Perhaps the only one who's like into a pure testing role is Rahul at Autocar. I don't think there's anybody else like that. Everybody else tests as well as writes. So you need to be a good writer. Now you also need to be a good presenter, because there is nobody that can say, hello, I'm only writing.
Yeah.
Presenting is not my job. Today you have to be able to do both. In fact, not 2, but 3. You need to be able to put out content on social media and engaging, interesting content. It's not like we've got 5 cameramen with us shooting video for us for reels. We're doing it ourselves on our regular phones. A regular iPhone or any Android phone today has got a decent enough camera for you to be able to take video clips or good photographs. The important thing on social media is that it needs to be interactive. You need to be able to get responses from your audience, and that's how you grow. That's how you build that engagement. And you need to be able to do all of that. So even if you are not interested in writing for a magazine, if you want to just present, having that ability to write makes a hell of a lot of difference, because then you can write a tight, crisp, and humorous script.
Yep.
And that will make people notice you, rather than just know, oh, this is a cup and this is white and this has got some motorcycles on it and it's got some tea inside it. But if you can pen something interesting around it, it just becomes so much more engaging for your end user, which is your viewer or your reader. And you want him or her to be a fan of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I struggled with scripts initially because we shifted to video at some point, but we didn't have
Kicking and
any.
screaming.
Yeah.
We didn't do that very willingly. In fact, if I had to look back and see what I would have done differently when we started off Evo in 2012, we should have gone all guns blazing into video.
Yeah.
Maybe we would do one video a month, and that's about
Mushkil
it.
se.
Mushkil se.
Yeah.
You know,
And 2
so-
minutes long.
No, actually, we were always very verbose.
No,
You-
I remember that. Remember that Polo GTTSI at the runway and all those 3 minute long videos. And that time
Yeah,
it seemed like 4 minute video. Wow.
maybe, yeah. But it took us time.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking earlier about we were just thrown in at the deep end with video as well.
Yeah.
So, Overdrive, when it got taken over by Network 18, this
Mm.
big conglomerate where they also had television and everything, that's when Overdrive then moved onto television, onto CNBC TV 18, as well as CNN IBN. And we just jumped right into it. I think we had maybe 2-3 days of not even training, it was just coaching as to, okay, this is how it is, this is a structure. Luckily for us, we always had good producers coming with us.
Mm.
We had Anuradha Sen Gupta, who was the executive producer for the show, and she was a taskmaster. She had an eye for quality and detail. Like I don't think anybody still has that. And she would scream at us. She would like murder us, and that drilled quality into us. Sandeep Shrikant, who was the producer, would come out on shoots with all of us. He would be running around making sure that we would get all the content in the bag. The cameramen that came with us,
So
they were really good. They taught us so much, because without them, I don't think we would be where we are today. So that grounding, that at least personally, what I got at CNBC with that crew,
Mm.
it really drilled quality into us, and that's why I am what I am today, because of that foundation. So when we started really moving into videos hard and strong,
Mm.
that's what we adapted. But also we had to move on with the times, because I think that was the time when Power Drift was also coming up with this really cool biking
Yeah.
videos, which in terms of cinematography, in terms of their just their sheer visuals, that was next level compared to what all of us were doing. And we all looked at that and said, oh shit, okay, now if you do this and allied this with our experience and our reviewing skills, man, that could be something. And that's how all of us, not just Evo, I mean, everybody else, if you look at how Autocar has transitioned, they've always been jumping into new areas ASAP. Whether it is the website, or whether it is television, or whether it is YouTube, they've always been there. And in this industry, or in any industry for that matter, competition is always good, because competition keeps you on your toes. And today, because Autocar keeps pushing, it forces all of us to keep pushing, because if we sit on our asses, we'll be finished before the day is over. We are dead, we are over. So that pushes you to keep doing things. So anyway, I'm rambling now. Coming back to what we were talking about.
Internships.
Internships. So internships, basically, you do everything.
Yeah.
And in the internship, we then figure out what you are good at. You might not realize what's happening. You might think it's just utter chaos, that you're doing 200 things. You're coming to work at 9:30 in the morning. You're leaving work at 9:30 in the night. Sometimes when you're closing your show, you're leaving home at 2:30 in the morning. But we are looking at what your capabilities are, what your interests, where your interests lie, and slowly yet surely, you will then start to do things that A, you enjoy doing, and B, you're good at doing.
Correct, absolutely. And I also think we should talk about the other roles available in this space today. Now, we keep saying automotive journalism has changed, has changed, but it's
Hmm.
also changed in terms of who works with us.
Hmm.
We had photographers
Hmm.
at some point. Now, today, we have filmmakers,
Hmm.
we have editors,
Hmm.
we have social media guys, we have SEO guys.
Hmm.
The number of roles that an organization like ours
Hmm.
has is so much more than what it was 10 years ago.
So when I started off, we had one photographer at Overdrive, and we used to all pick up the camera and we would all shoot. Adil used to shoot, myself, I used to shoot, Bertie, Yogendra, all of us used to shoot. We enjoyed photography, and also the demands on a photographer or on just that basic photography wasn't so great. We would shoot on auto mode all the time. And I think 6 months after I joined, the guys from Better Photography, sister magazine at Overdrive, at Infomedia in those days, they came down and taught us how to take panning shots. That was the first time I learned about shutter priority. I didn't even know what shutter priority was. We used to shoot on film, so obviously only once the film was developed would we know how horribly we taken pictures. We would print at a photo fast, which was under our office, and then when we wanted to blow up some shots for the double spread, we would get that printed into a larger size at there was another studio in camp where we would get that printed. But photography wasn't given the importance that it is today. Today, magazines are a visual medium. So obviously, writing has to progress, and it is progressing. But if it's not backed up by fantastic pictures, those pictures that make you go, oh man, nobody read a magazine. Today, our photographers, they have a really cool eye for detail. A car, it doesn't photograph well from all angles. You need to know which angle it looks good from. Dynamic shots, getting that is so important. Like Evo is all about dynamic shots. We very rarely do static shots. I think we should do a little more static shots, but we rarely do that because the magazine is all about those super cool dynamic shots. Now, you can't put a car sideways 50 times. By the fifth time, the tires are gone, the car can't take it. You want your photographer to get that sideways shot the first time you do it, and that's it. You don't want to screw up the car because that car has to go to other magazines. The manufacturer will whip you if you ruin a car, and that's not who we are, right? We don't want to damage cars, kill tires before we give it. So you want that one cool shot, and that's it. That's where an extremely skilled photographer is hugely important. Today at Evo, we have as many photographers and filmmakers as we have writers and presenters. In fact, we have more on the visual side.
Yeah.
So photographers are one. Earlier, when we used to do videos, naam ke vaste, it was the photographer who was doing video also,
Yeah.
and who was also editing it.
Yeah.
That's why
I've also
also
edited videos, Sirish.
I've also edited video. Uh, I think when we were doing the stunting series, the very first stunting series,
Yeah.
I also dabbled with editing. So you everybody can do it,
Yeah.
but you're not specialized at it.
Yeah.
And the specialists, they raise the level 10 notches. And that's the difference with all publishing houses today.
Yeah.
So our filmmakers, again, they are extremely skilled. And I think a filmmaker's job is physically extremely demanding because a photographer, in 2 hours, he can get enough shots for a magazine story, plus social media, plus website. The filmmaker is continuously shooting because you have traffic in the shot, you can't use that shot. You have to do it again. You have to do passing shots, you have to do tracking shots, you have to do follow shots, you have to do static shots, you have to do interior shots. Then
With
all
heavier
the
equipment.
with heavy equipment, then all the buck that the presenter wants to do, then all the fumbles. So, hello, welcome to, then again do it again, then again do it again. So, it is physically extremely demanding, and India is a hot country. At least now the weather is, you can tolerate it, but in another month, the heat starts, and then it is just non-stop heat. And in that heat, shooting with, like you said, heavy equipment. We use Lumix cameras with the gimbal. It's heavy, so you need muscle, you need fitness. We shoot in the heat, we shoot in the cold, we shoot early morning, we shoot late in the evening, we shoot in the afternoon, all the time. So you have to be physically fit, plus you have to be an artist. These are artistic roles. Now that's photographers and videographers. Then you have your video editors. Now these are guys also who bring life to the videos in the same way that our art director brings life to the pages of the magazine by selecting the right pictures, by placing it in the right way, putting the text around it, making those stories look visually appealing. That's the job of the art editor. Similarly, the video editor, he then stitches this whole thing together and brings the story alive. And of course, a lot of times, like for instance, when we're doing the Gone But Not Forgotten series, add a lot of humor to it, bring that added, no, I wouldn't say factor, but that light-hearted thing that you bring out. So different stories need different things, and that's what the video editor brings out. Now, on top of that, we also need social media specialists. We need SEO specialists, which we have now, to make sure that the YouTube videos that we are doing reach out to a wider audience.
Yep.
No longer this case that where you just film a video, edit it, cut it, put it out on YouTube, and kaam khatam.
Yep.
It needs to be the title, description, thumbnail, and then the 25 other things that you guys keep telling me about. It all needs to be done properly so that it then reaches out to a proper audience. So the roles in a publishing setup, is it right to call it a publishing setup when we are also doing video?
Why
Or
not?
a media organization? And
We're still publishing our videos.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, but in an automotive media house,
Yeah.
like what we are, a boutique automotive media house. Yeah, that sounds nice, also, right?
Yeah.
So, in a boutique automotive media house, the skill sets that are required are rather extensive. We also need sales and marketing people.
Yeah.
Right. So that's also required. And if we have an enthusiast who can also do that, well, the more the merrier. In fact, this might sound like a recruitment ad. Sort of it is. So if you are interested, careers at gtopublishing.com. And in any case, we keep putting this out on social media. So we do take interns every 6 months. We have a fresh batch of interns that join in. We also do take in people at senior roles across the different divisions. So we are constantly on the lookout for talent. And it's not just GTO Publishing, it's not just Evo. Every magazine, every publishing house out there is on the lookout for good talent. if you have the aptitude for it, if you have that fire in your belly, there are roles for you at different places. Because today we're putting out so much of content, there's so
Yeah.
many things to do, that we're constantly looking out for great people to be able to stitch it all together, whether anchor it, whether host it, whether edit it, whether directed. You, Atish, on a lot of the big shoots that I've done, you've been an invaluable resource because you've been the director on the shoot.
Yeah.
When we've done the drifting video, you were there to make sure that we got all the shots and we went as per the script. You did the script.
Yeah.
The script is extremely important, because without the script, there's nothing. Then it's just you're going there, you're doing it on the fly, and we've done this many times. We've done this many times. We've come to the office and they say, "Shit, man,
Yeah. We
if we
made the
had
mistakes.
yeah, if we had done this right, if we had just scripted this better, if we had taken that, scripting takes maybe an hour.
Sometimes more.
Okay, sometimes more. But if you just spend that hour or day or 2 days in
Yeah.
scripting, then the 5 days that you spend on the shoot
Yeah.
and the 15 days that you would spend on the edit table would just come down.
Yeah. It makes
would become
everyone's life
so much
easier.
quicker.
Yeah. It makes everyone's life easier.
So those are the different roles. Have I missed out on anything, Atish?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, we have not
Copy
mentioned
editors. We haven't spoken about copy editors.
copy editors. I think that's a dying breed,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
But we need them now
we
more than ever.
we definitely
Yeah.
need them. So we have 2 copy editors right
Yeah.
now, and copy editors are required, because I think sadly, in this rush to put out content, we are maybe losing a little bit focus on quality, on making
No,
sure
it's
that
definitely happening.
every word is precise, is there are no errors. That is very
I'll
important.
give you an
And
example of this. You read the Auto Expo coverage from the days of the expo, and you read the Auto Expo coverage of the same content 3 days later. There's a marked difference in the stuff that's being said and how it's being said. Because even we've made this mistake. Not a mistake, I say it's just the nature of what we're doing. On the day you're reporting as fast as you can. You may not have the full picture, but you're reporting what you know. 3 days later, you've spent the time to find out every single detail. That podcast that we did about the Tatas, that's when we knew everything that we should have known before we put out any stories. But the nature of the game has changed. If we waited 3 days to put out any content, we'd have been we'd have missed the mark massively. So you put out what you know at the time, and then you fill it in later with the details. It's I wouldn't say it's right or wrong. It's just different.
yeah, it's different. It
Yeah.
is the nature of the game. For instance, when we put out the Tata Sierra video, the Curve video, the raps were off it. On stage, they said a few things. We didn't even get the press kit.
Yeah.
We were running around asking for the press kit. They said agency sending press kit. We didn't get the press kit. So whatever we heard and whatever we assumed,
Correct.
we just rambled it out there
A lot of
and
it was just
let it go.
yeah.
Then afterwards, when we came, then we spoke to the engineers. Then we figured out that the Sierra will have both ICE as well as EV. The future of the Harrier EV, the Curve, all
which
of that.
engines it'll get.
Which engines, all of that.
timelines.
Talk to the designers and everything, and that's when you put out great content. So, moral of the story is that, or at least the message to you guys is that, do watch the follow-on stuff, because it will have more information. And read a magazine, because the magazine will always be accurate. And I don't mean just Evo magazine, right?
Every
Even though it's a
magazine.
shameless plug, but every magazine, like Autocar, I read all the magazines, because everybody has a different perspective. And because the industry is so big today, it's not like everybody is putting the same content out. Everybody has something different. And
Everyone has their own
something
style,
unique.
and I think that's important. Everybody brings their own audience. They have their own core audience, and then there's a fringe audience that follows a lot of people. So they're invaluable.
True.
you know?
And the magazine, it actually lays a solid platform and foundation for everybody in the team, because there's so much of rigor and hard work that goes into a magazine, that just translates into every other department also that is putting out content on other mediums also. So that's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but
No, I
I've
agree
been
with you.
there for now. I've been doing this for 23 years.
It-
So I've seen the evolution, but the foundation always remains the same. And the foundation is proper, rigorous testing, understanding what the car or the bike is doing, and communicating that in clean, simple terms. Then on top of that, you add humor, you have a little bit more prose, a little bit more la 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 lulu. But that basic foundation, that core needs to be there. And that's what a magazine, because of the legacy behind it, for good or bad, but that legacy actually has a nice system and process that everybody goes through. which then makes you good evaluators of cars. Now, I've seen that with myself personally. I've seen that with you guys. So many of you guys have come through the ranks at Evo, and you'll have learned. When you came in, you knew how to ride an Activa.
Just about.
Uh, in between, when you left to join Top Gear,
Yeah.
you could get your knee down. You went racing on a motorcycle,
Yeah.
right? So we took you from just about on an Activa in 3 or 4 years to being able to go and race
Yeah.
TVS. Okay, chalo, it was a media race, but end of the day, it
Still
was
race.
it
Yeah.
was a race,
It was
right?
a race.
So you went and raced.
Yeah.
I look at our photographers. Rohit, he couldn't drive a car when he came, and over the years, he learned. Okay, he didn't learn with media cars; he learned on his own. But he just observed us driving on all our trips,
Yeah.
features, and he's become such a good driver that when I'm tired, I give him the wheel and I take a nap in the car, and I'm a horrible passenger,
Yeah.
as you would probably know. So it's just general raising of the skill sets across the different guys in the organization that is important. And that brings me to the last point on your list.
Women.
Yeah. So if there's one regret, okay, maybe not regret, but there's one area that we didn't focus on enough was to bring more ladies, more women, more girls into this line. Maybe that was to do with the way we work, which is a lot of days out on the road, and just it's easier for guys. We are shooting in the boondocks, no proper loose,
Yeah.
but I don't think that should be a barrier anymore.
Correct.
And we are always on the lookout for enthusiastic people, whether
Yeah.
it's guys, girls, we're always on the lookout for enthusiastic people.
And the thing is, there are women who've done it.
Yeah. So there's Renuka at Autocar, there is Mugda at Vodka, there are a few other women as
Mhm.
well who bring their own perspective.
Yeah.
And they all, like Renuka, for instance, she's a rally driver. She's a good driver. She's been there with us guys for, I think now, what, 20 years or so? So she's gone through that. Now, if you need an example of somebody, she's there. So this is something that anybody can do as long as you have the passion for it. So I don't think being a woman is any barrier in this anymore. And of course, everybody is now intelligent enough, smart enough to know where the boundaries are and to just maintain those boundaries. So it's open, yeah, it's open for everybody. A lot of girls keep asking me, like when I go for races and all that, they ask me that, oh, we also want to come and we also want to join. And I say, yeah, it's there. The same criteria that applies to guys also applies for the women. So it's not like there'll be a ladies class. I don't believe in that because everybody wants equality, and this whole concept of a ladies class, I don't believe in it. It's the same. So if you have an eye for detail, if you are a good photographer, if you are a good videographer, if you can write well, if you can test well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
open, it's
Yeah.
there.
And that leads us into the fact that we are hiring. Right now, internships and all sorts of roles are open across Evo India. We are looking for talent to come and join us. So if you do see yourself fitting into a role here, we've spoken about all of the possible roles already in the podcast. So if you do see yourself fitting into a possible role at Evo India, write into us, careers@gtopublishing.com. You'll see it in the supers on the screen right now, and we'll also put it in the description below so that you can write in. And we look forward to hearing from you and seeing your applications.
Yep. So we also thought we'll talk about some of our life experiences, but then that becomes a bit too long because automotive journalism gives you so many stories. You can just keep going
We can
on
do
and on.
we can do a podcast on every single drive we've had, basically.
Yeah. So like this ice driving experience I went out on, I can just go on and on about it. In fact, I got into proper rallying after I did my first ice driving experience with Audi. That was maybe in 2011 or so, and that's when they taught us the Scandinavian flick. And after the end of those 2 days, I said that, shit, man, if I can do this and if I have this burning desire to go rallying, I might as well do this now rather than when I'm 50 and then my reflexes are gone and finished. And then you always regret that, oh shit, man, I should have done it that time. So I said that no matter what, I will do it. And that's how I got into proper rallying. Before that, I'd only done the reliability on the raid and the desert storm. But after doing that ice driving experience with Audi, after learning and realizing that I could control a car that was going sideways, that's when I got into rallying. And look at where that has gotten me. So that's just one of the examples
Yeah.
of the stories and the opportunities that this job gives you. With rallying, I got sponsorship, fortunately, because I was also doing stories. I was doing stories in the magazine, on TV. So that helped me get sponsors as well. So I didn't have to put in tons of my own cash. Obviously, you have to invest in yourself. That goes without saying. But you had this opportunity. You could bring a couple of other angles into this, and rallying needed coverage at that time. And I brought that. So that was just one of the things that this job, it helps you travel. We've traveled, forget the world. In India, we've gone to such fabulous places. Every time we go up to Ladakh, we discover a new place.
Yeah.
Recently, when we went up to Umlingla Pass with the Nexon EV Max, did that record taking the electric car to the highest motorable road in the world. And then on the way back, we took this back road. It was not even a road, it was just a track that went through the plains. And on the right, I think not even a kilometer away, were the mountains, and that's the border with China. Very few civilians have even gone there. Every time you go there, you find a new road. You go to the northeast, and the culture, the roads, the terrain, the hills is just so different from where we are, which is Mumbai, Pune.
Yeah.
You go to Kerala and you find new roads every single
Yeah.
time. It just takes
And
you
not
to such
just
different
Kerala,
places.
not even exotic stuff. You go to UP, you go to Bihar. These are places we'd never go
Yep.
if we were not doing
Yep.
this job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Orissa,
Yeah.
we've found such great roads along the
Yeah.
coast in Orissa. The first time I went there, I was like, wow. And so on the west coast, you see the sunset. There you see the sunrise over the waters. It's just that variety that
Yeah.
you
It opens
tend
your
to
mind up to
experience.
so many things.
And I must also mention
Yeah.
the people that you meet,
Yeah.
because you meet such interesting people. Personally, I've always found motorsport to have the most wackiest characters, the craziest, looniest, but also the most enthusiastic people you find in motorsport. That's where I like to say that no, I was blooded in motorsport. My first event I went to cover was the rally in Nasik. 2 years later, I drove the forward car, the 00 car at the Nasik rally. So I always like to think of myself as a motorsport man. But honestly, I've seen other people who genuinely grew up in motorsport. And these are guys who are passionate to a fault, but also so knowledgeable about cars and bikes. A lot of stuff that I learned about cars, how to evaluate cars, how to drive cars, how to test cars, I learned it in the crucible of motorsport. And the people who I respect a lot, guys like Aspi. Aspi was the road test editor when I joined Overdrive. He was already a biking legend. He taught me about lines, cornering lines. It might sound like something trivial, but just getting your lines right makes you such a faster, safer rider, driver on the road.
Yeah.
Just lines. He gave me that foundation. The first time I went rallying, learning how to drive a rally car, and then that teaches you how to set up a suspension, which teaches you what a suspension actually does. And now on a road car, when I talk about pitch, when I talk about yaw, when I talk about rebound, it all comes from those years I spent in rallying, understanding it, then setting up the car to curb some instincts or to enhance some other instincts. So it all comes from there. So, okay, not everybody can go out and race or rally. Motorsport is expensive, but it all helps you. And being a journalist, doing this, like you, for instance, you got to go and race.
Yeah.
You got
Race,
to
rally,
go
everything.
race, rally. You did the Dakshin there.
Yeah.
You destroyed a gypsy there. You
I
destroyed
didn't destroy
an
anything.
Esteem there. Well, you were riding shotgun when
I was co-driver.
you were co-driver, but you did all that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and those are A, life experiences,
Yeah.
but B, more importantly, that's your education. That's the foundation that you then build on.
They're also some of my fondest memories of this job.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like when people ask me what are the craziest things you've done at work, I like driving Lambos on roads are great, but have you driven an Esteem for 5 days on the Dakshin day? That is a story. You know?
And taking the struts through the towers.
I didn't do that. That was not me.
Yeah, so in the office,
Yeah.
all the pictures that I have is all from my rallying days.
Yeah.
Even though I have pictures with Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Porsches,
Exactly.
which I've enjoyed driving, but all the pictures that are there are there's an Alto, there's an Estive,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of CDs and a whole bunch of Polos.
Yeah, exactly. And those are the stories that you remember. Those are the stories that you come away with, which have shaped you.
Yeah.
You know, 5 days in motorsport shape you more than 1 year I don't know,
Yeah.
anywhere else.
In fact, Aatish wanted to do this podcast on the Dakar, and I said that we should do something a little more relevant. So that's why we're doing this on automotive
So if you want
journalism.
to hear about the Dakar, leave enough comments down below so we can do that.
Yep. So leave comments, Let us know what we should be talking about.
Yeah.
We are enhancing, as you can see, our entire podcast setup. So obviously, we need to do more content, and the more relevant it is to you guys and girls, better is it for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't forget to subscribe to the Evo Unit channel, hit that bell icon as we always tell you to. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll also try and illustrate this with pictures and images of what we're talking about, so it becomes a little bit more interactive. But of course, this goes out on all podcast channels, so you can listen to it on your way to or from work. And hopefully, it inspires a few of you. It inspires the next generation of automotive journalists, because that's what we are here to do. We are here to leave this industry in a better place than we jumped into it.
Yeah, when we started, we didn't have guys putting up podcasts saying, "Come join us." We struggled to get a job.
When I started off, my parents genuinely thought that I had lost it.
Yeah.
In fact, they probably thought that I had a girlfriend, so because of that, I didn't want to go to the States. So he's finding some bloody excuse to stay back. And my whole reason for joining Overdrive, I was not a writer, and I did not know that I enjoyed writing as well. The first thing I wrote was about my Zen. It was like a I love my cow, I love my dog compositions that we do in school. That obviously showed some amount of flair, so that's why I got hired. But that those days, automotive journalism was not a job.
Yeah.
It was, and for me, I joined because I thought there would be this whole bunch of cars and nobody would drive it. So I would just go and drive cars. And I thought I'll do this for a year. Okay, that would be my break year. And then I would go because I'd got an extension. And then I'd go and do my master's.
So it's been 22 years break here now.
23 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I took a break here. For 8 months, I did work at
Yeah.
Porsche as the marketing and communications head.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is much better. I've been on the other side. Always you think that the grass is greener on the other side.
Hmm.
Okay. So I, like everybody else, also had the same thoughts. I did go to the other side. I did experience it. What I did realize was the guys out there, we think that, oh, they have a really cushy job, cushy life. But no, man, those guys also work their asses off in their own ways. For them to deal with us, it's also not easy, but they deal with just so much more. So we actually have it not easy, but we're doing something that we are passionate about. We wake up
Yeah.
in the morning, we are
That makes
raring
it
to
easy.
go.
Yeah.
So I think that does make it easy.
100%.
So not to diss anybody, but for me personally, I've seen the other side, and this really and is a great job. And it just, the whole COVID years when we're sitting not doing that much, it just added another layer of appreciation to what we do. Now when we went for this ice driving experience, we had done the advanced course, and now we were back to doing the beginner course, because the advanced course had cars that were not relevant from an India perspective. In the past, we would have cribbed and bitched about it and moaned, but this time, to the last man and woman, we all said thank you, boss, thank you. After years, we're coming and doing this. Jo bhi hai, it's good, man. Just, it's added that layer of appreciation to all of us. And if you appreciate something, you tend to do a better job of it.
For sure.
And I think with that, we should cut. So thank you guys for listening, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you have any more questions, drop it in the comments, and we will do a follow-up podcast on this with your questions. So we will get back to you with all the important, relevant questions that you have. Check out the link in the description if you would like to explore roles at GTO Publishing at Evo India. Multiple roles are opening up right now. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thanks, Aatish. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you.